What's up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of COASTER-net. I'm, of course, Mr. Andy Robarchek from Chicago, Illinois, joined once again by my partner in crime here, Mr. Danny Miller. Danny, I think we got a really cool topic here tonight. What do you think?
Yeah, we talked a couple days ago about things that we can do here, sort of in the extended off season, to get us through here until the parks finally start to open. And we came up with a long list of ideas.
A list, Danny, a list.
A list. Go ahead and drink up if you're playing the shaking the paper in front of the camera drinking game. But one of the ideas we had is something that people have done a lot. I think different podcasts and YouTube channels and whatever. We've seen a lot of different mediums do this, and it is the good old coaster swap. The idea of the coaster swap, taking a ride from one park and switching it with a ride from another park to try and improve both parks, or maybe you're going to be a little bit selfish. And you and I were talking a little earlier today about some different ideas that we had for how to approach this. So we're gonna do like, 4. We might venture into like a sort of a fifth one. We came up with a couple on our own, and we're going to talk about some of them tonight, but this might be something that we do several episodes on.
Well, and I think the key is anyone can move one coaster and put it into another park, but the key is I think the challenge here is to switch two coasters to make both parks better. And that's not as easy to do. And anyone can be like, oh, I'm going to take El Toro and put it at Cedar Point. Well, congrats. Like that was going on a limb there, guys. That was a real mind bender there. But trying to take two coasters
makes Cedar Point better anyway.
Yeah, and trying to take two coasters with the goal of, making both parks better and having both parks, be a winner in that. So we're going to take a few looks at some of these here tonight. And I think, do you want to start with one of mine, or you want to start with one of yours?
Start with one of yours, because we had two different approaches to this. But the 4 that we're going to talk about, 2 from you, 2 from me, you're going to see some similarities between the two.
Well, the first one I looked at, and I said, you know what? And I think a general theory is what both of us took was, okay, we got to find a park that has too much of something. We got to find another park that has too much of something. And we need to flip those somehow to even both those parks out. And the first thing I looked at was Six Flags St. Louis. And Six Flags St. Louis, I think, is a park that needs something, that needs a signature steel roller coaster. And, they just don't have that. They have 3 wooden coasters. They have the Boss, which the first half is really, really good. Second half is pretty forgettable. You have Screamin' Eagle. That's a solid wood coaster, especially right after they do some maintenance on that bad boy. That thing's flying through that track. And then you have American Thunder, which is one that I'm not a huge fan of. I know you're a bigger fan of American Thunder. People love American Thunder. So I'm looking at those 3 wood coasters. Too many wood coasters for one park when you don't have a steel coaster, right? Like that's my thinking here. So then I looked at a place like Six Flags Great Adventure. And here's a park that has a plethora of steel coasters, from Nitro to Batman to Dark Knight to Green Lantern to Superman. All these great steel roller coasters. And I said, well, why don't we make a trade here? Why don't we move? And I'm going to put a little caveat here too, Danny. I'm not going to make a simple trade.
Uh-oh.
I'm like the Scotty Boylan of coasters here, where I got to make something spectacular happen. So so I'm going to trade American Thunder from Six Flags St. Louis, their signature, maybe their best wood coaster, and I'm going to trade it for the former Chang, the stand-up coaster that B&M coaster that was at Kentucky Kingdom is now Green Lantern. But I'm going to throw a caveat there. I'm going to say when you move it over to Six Flags St. Louis, you put the sit-down trains on it and you make it into a floorless coaster like we've seen done with Patriot and Rougarou. And I think Chang is a great stand-up coaster. I don't think there's a whole lot of people, but stand-up coasters kind of out of the thing. I mean, not as modern. I think if you want to move it over, I think you put the sit-down trains on it to make it even better. And I think that's the trade. It makes both parks better, in my opinion. Great Adventure gets a classic wooden coaster. They have El Toro. That's really their only real wood coaster there, right? They don't have another wood coaster.
Yeah, ever since they took Rolling Thunder out.
Yeah, so ever since Rolling Thunder's gone, they don't have a traditional wood coaster, if you will. American Thunder fits that bill. And you send Green Lantern over to Six Flags St. Louis, and they get a signature steel coaster. And bringing Chang back to the Midwest, too, I think, is something to be said there.
Yeah, and I started to laugh a little bit there because you're already mentioning a couple of the rides that I was debating on my own. I think that's a really good trade. I think you do, and it's not so much, I think we have to focus on, it's not so much that you're necessarily making these parks better. In some cases you are, in a lot of cases you are, but it's also maybe about making them more well-rounded. And I think Six Flags St. Louis is a good example of that. Taking out American Thunder and putting in a sit-down Green Lantern, you could argue whether or not that makes that park better, but I don't think you can argue that makes Six Flags St. Louis more well-rounded. They do miss a signature steel coaster. I mean, really, Batman the Ride.
Batman's their signature steel right now. That's not a signature steel. That's a supporting cast.
Yeah, I mean, Batman at Great Adventure is probably only the fourth or fifth best steel coaster there. So, I mean, if that's the signature at the other ride, maybe a Mr. Freeze, I don't know. But you definitely want something a little better there. I think a floorless Chang would certainly be a good addition there.
And you don't really have a floorless coaster in the region. Great America doesn't have one. Cedar Point technically has one.
Worlds of Fun
doesn't have a sit-down or a floorless coaster. So you don't have anything like that in the region either. So it gives you something unique a little bit as well.
No, I think that's a real good point.
And I'm not discounting. I think it does make Great Adventure a better park too. I don't think Green Lantern.
No, I absolutely agree there. I think what you'll find, and this is definitely the case with mine here as I look at them, it makes one park definitively better, and it makes the other park maybe more well-rounded. I think is kind of how we went along with this. And you're going to see similarities here with my first one here, because I was a little bit more selfish when I went about this.
Of course, that's real shock there, Danny Miller.
Well, it's selfish in the sense that I have looked back at things that I have said, things that I've been saying for years.
Yeah.
Things that I've been saying for years that I think a park needs to do, or something that I want a park to do, or something that I want a park to get. And I thought of a way to make that happen where it would make sense. So what's one of the things that I have said for years that I want Dorney Park to get, my home park?
You've been talking about a GCI at Dorney for basically forever.
That's right. I hit the little level thing on my chair here, and I sunk down into the abyss here. I don't know how that happened. Yes, I've been wanting the GCI at Dorney.
We can't let you get any shorter here.
I know. I won't be able to ride the rides anymore. But I will still fit in my paint-splattered car. Anyways, so yes, the Dorney Park GCI, right? And so the immediately came to sort of the discussion in my head of what park has a GCI that also has several other wood coasters. And that list gets pretty short pretty quick.
Yeah.
You can't really take out, you could maybe take out Thunderhead. You could maybe take out like a Lightning Racer or a Wildcat, but I want something a little better than that. And the other issue is I was trying to think of, well, what could I take from Dorney to give to one of those other parks to sort of round it out a little better. You can't really take out Renegade. There's not really another supporting cast there. Those were some of the ones that I immediately thought of. I did think of American Thunder or The Boss. I did think of one of those two. And I think American Thunder might actually be my second choice for this because of the wood coaster collection already there for the same reasons that you took out American Thunder. However, I went with Mystic Timbers because I think there's a certain, at least with the general public and a lot of the hardcore fans, there's a certain aura around the beast that just won't ever go away. And in that regard, it seems like Mystic Timbers, even though it's the better ride, it seems like Mystic Timbers, in some ways, not always, but in some ways will always be second fiddle to the beast. I don't know if it's the Legend. I don't know if it's the Night Ride. I don't know if it's the GP. I don't know what it is. But there's something about the beast that will never be toppled by Mystic Timbers.
Like, even on Media Day for Mystic Timbers, people were still like, oh, the beast is better. And I'm like, okay.
So that's why, and I understand there's a lot of hardcore Kings Island coaster fans that are going to be mad that I'm pulling out Mystic Timbers, but a lot of those people also like the beast. Some of them don't, but that's fine. Yeah. Plus, you've got Racer. You've got Racer, which is a fine ride, and you've got your kiddie wood coaster. So there is an excess of wood coasters there at Kings Island. So I'm going to take Mystic Timbers because that's the style of GCI that we said Dorney would be good for in that back corner of the park, a Prowler, a Mystic Timbers, something like that. So I'm not going to take Steel Force from Dorney. You've already got a hyper coaster. Not going to take Talon. You've already got an invert. I decided on Hydra the Revenge. And because one, Hydra is sort of forgotten in the cast of Dorney coasters between Talon and Steel Force. It kind of plays third fiddle to both of those because I don't think it's as good. And I thought Hydra was a good fit for Kings Island because they just removed Vortex, which is their multi-looping sit-down coaster. And having also removed Firehawk, it sort of gives them back a coaster that's about inversions and about going upside down. So, again, adding Mystic Timbers and removing Hydra definitely, I think, makes Dorney the better park. And I think the swap on the other side from Kings Island makes Kings Island a more well-rounded park. Maybe not necessarily better, but it sort of adds where they've taken two away recently, and you still have a good wood coaster collection.
Yeah, that's interesting because my next one. It's funny because what I'm going to do next actually would be helped by Mystic Timbers leaving. So that's interesting because it solves the problem that I have. No, but I like this one because, like you said, Mystic Timbers doesn't get the respect I think that it deserves at Kings Island. That nobody like even look at our Thrilling 32 poll. Mystic Timbers is falling down the ranks, and I think if you put Mystic Timbers at any other park, I think it gets a little bit more respect. But because it's at Kings Island with that history of the beast, that it's just there's something there that doesn't mesh well. I love Mystic Timbers. I think it's clearly the best wood coaster at Kings Island. There is no question in my mind that is true. But there are people out there, Danny, that think that's not true. So I think moving it to Dorney, a park that needs a signature ride, I think Mystic Timbers easily becomes the best ride at Dorney Park. And keep in mind, we're discounting location and ravines and all that other bullshit. Yeah. We're just assuming that you can plop it down and it be the same, that they figure it out. We're not figuring all that out.
Yeah, so don't go in the comments and say, well, Mystic Timbers would never work at Dorney because they don't have enough space. Yeah. We know that. Forget it. Hydra would never work at Kings Island. Well, it probably would. But
I think that's exactly what happens there is
and don't forget the whole thing with the JoJo roll. I mean, that's a little bit of a unique thing that Kings Island would kind of be able to sell pretty well, I feel.
And with the absence of Vortex now, Kings Island kind of needs those supporting players. And I guess Mystic Timbers fits that bill too. But having that major steel coaster somewhere in your park, I just think looks better too at some level. That you're going to have Banshee and Orion now. and Diamondback and adding another B&M.
Hydra would fit into the mix there pretty well, and it's the capacity machine that Vortex really could be at times too. So I think there's a lot of good reasons that Hydra would fit well as a supporting player and fill the role of a Vortex and Firehawk.
So my next one was going to try and fix Cedar Point, and we all know
that's where my next one was gonna go.
Yeah,
to.
Exactly. Kind of strange that we both went here, but it's interesting that we both went down different roads here too.
We went down very different roads.
Yeah. So I said the problem with Cedar Point is they need that signature wood coaster now, and I think Prowler is the perfect type of ride for Cedar Point. Once again, space not being an issue. So Prowler, so then I looked at it and said, okay, Prowler is the one I want to target because, yes, Prowler is by far the best ride at Worlds of Fun. But they have another wood coaster there in Timberwolf.
And Timberwolf is much improved the last couple of years. I think 5 years ago, this isn't a trade you could make at all. No.
Timberwolf now, with the retracking and the design of some of the hills and stuff on the back end, I think Timberwolf is a much improved wood coaster. That it's a lot of fun. And Prowler is good, but I'm gonna make this trade here, Danny, and I'll see if you'll allow it. We'll see what happens. But my initial trade was Prowler for Gemini. And people are gonna start throwing, oh, Gemini, they want to tear that shit down. Well, I've been making the case for a while that you put Gemini in any other park, and Gemini becomes a gem amongst the coaster enthusiasts. That Gemini becomes something. Oh, it's a racing classic aero coaster, a racing coaster, has great drops on it, and I think that's kind of what Worlds of Fun is missing a little bit. Is a classic coaster. Where, they've been known to tear out some of their older coasters, like an Orient Express or, stuff like that, where they don't have everything there seems new, like what's their oldest coaster? Like Timberwolf, Boomerang?
Timberwolf, Boomerang. I mean, Mamba's 98, Patriots 2006, Prowler's 2009.
Like everything's very new there. And I think a classic racing wood coaster like Gemini would be a much better fit for that park. That's going to be a coaster that
visually would look very good.
Absolutely. You put that in like the American section a little bit or something like that. Give it a new name, paint it red, white, and blue. I don't know. Do something to it. But Danny, I'll throw this out there to you. For all the people that are like, oh, that's a bad trade. What if I sweeten the deal for you a little bit? Throw a little bit more. What if I say Prowler, because I agree that Gemini is not as good as Prowler. What if I said Gemini and Wicked Twister for Prowler? So two rides that Cedar Point, in theory, has been talking about getting rid of. That there is talk of getting rid of Gemini. There's talk of getting rid of Wicked Twister for the last few years now. So I'm going to take both of those rides, give them new lives at Worlds of Fun. Worlds of Fun gets a classic coaster, aero, racer, and they also get a launch coaster, something they don't have. I think Wicked Twister, we were talking about how many years ago were we talking about Cannon going to Worlds of Fun. I think Wicked Twister is just as good as Cannon is on paper. Like, Cannon's got the launch, got a little, top hat and some dippity doodads.
But if you give me Gemini and Wicked Twister, I might take that over Cannon.
And you take both of those rides, and I think putting both those rides, Wicked Twister and Gemini, in Worlds of Fun makes that. I'm not saying the loss of Prowler, but those two rides, I think Gemini is going to be more popular at a park like Worlds of Fun than Prowler is. That visually, the height. You're going to get another high coaster.
Well, and the racing aspect is something that you could make use of.
Absolutely. And then the Wicked Twister, you get the launch factor, and that's one of the best, shuttle launches you're going to find anywhere. I think it's a good trade. Wicked Twister and Gemini for Prowler.
I'll allow it. I'll allow it. I like that. That's good. Yeah, I think you outlined very well why that would work out for both parks. Again, I think it definitively it gives Cedar Point something they desperately need. And I think it rounds out pretty well a park like Worlds of Fun. I mean, Timberwolf is much improved and I think is a good enough wood coaster that you could sacrifice Prowler to get those two rides. Gemini, the racing coaster, adds a little bit something there. It's got some decent airtime. It's got the interactivity with the slapping hands if you're not in one of these areas where you need to practice social distancing. And then Wicked Twister, the launch coaster. It is a record holder of sorts, so you can always add that in somewhere too. I think that's fine. I think that's fine. I like that one.
I'm pretty good at this game so far.
Now my second one also went to doing something to Cedar Point, and I thought about this. I said, okay, how do I make Cedar Point better, or how do I give something Cedar Point? Same thing with Dorney, right? Dorney said, what's something that I wanted to put in at Dorney for a while, the GCI, and what. We've talked that Cedar Point needs another wood coaster. What's the other thing we've talked about doing to Cedar Point when we talk about our projected 5-year plans?
It's always dark ride. It's
always the dark ride, right? So we've talked about.
Stephen Lynn's been predicting dark ride for like 17 years now.
So right, but since we were keeping it to coasters, I started looking at other parks. And you had another suggestion here that I think maybe we at least mentioned, but I kept it within Cedar Fair and I went Wonder Mountain's Guardian. And maybe you changed theme. I don't know. We're not going to talk about that.
No, you absolutely changed the theme and you changed it to Disaster Transport. Done.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So you would take Wonder Mountain's Guardian, the ride. You could change the theme because in theory you could do that anyways. And then I thought about, because Canada's Wonderland 15 years ago had a terrible roller coaster collection. They had a large collection of terrible roller coasters. And now with Behemoth, Leviathan, Wonder Mountain's Guardian, Yukon Striker, and now Vortex. I mean, for years, Vortex was their best ride. So I thought about how can I fill a need at Canada's Wonderland? And I almost went with Raptor. I almost removed Raptor to Canada's Wonderland, and the only reason I didn't...
Danny, no trade would be even with Raptor in it. There's unless you're trading Raptor for Steel Vengeance, but then you're trading within the same park, and it doesn't make sense.
Well, Canada's Wonderland already has the SLC, which, as bad as it is, it's. I mean, and I know LaRonde has a B&M and an SLC, but that's not the point here. And they also have the Kitty invert to Canada's Wonderland, so yeah. So I thought of, well, they still need a signature looping coaster. Yukon Striker, yes, but the signature thing about Yukon Striker is the height and the drop, not necessarily the inversions, even though it does have a few of them. You want something that's focused on inversions and twists and turns and whatnot. So I didn't go with Raptor, and I instead went with Rougarou, which is one we already mentioned here, because I feel like Rougarou is a ride that if you ask a lot of Cedar Point people, not all of them, but a good number of them, if you ask them, would you trade Rougarou for a dark ride style coaster? I think a fair number of people would take that trade. I don't know if it's 50-50. I don't know if it's 70-30. I would be interested in hearing in the comments below, if you're a Cedar Point local, or you go to Cedar Point a lot, you're a Cedar Point fanboy, would you trade Rougarou for a dark ride / coaster combination like a Wonder Mountain's Guardian, maybe with a Disaster Transport theme, or maybe with a Pirates theme, whatever you want to do?
I think the only person you're going to see a real resistance to that is probably Steve Lynn, because he's a Rougarou fan. But I just don't know a whole lot of Rougarou fans out there. And Rougarou, to me, was a bit of a letdown. And I think Wonder Mountain's Guardian was a bit of a letdown, too. I think both of them have their flaws. So you're not talking about top-tier rides here. You're talking about middle-of-the-line supporting cast. And Wonder Mountain's Guardian, I just feel like at Canada's Wonderland, Is it important there? Maybe because of the mountain itself. Like there's that whole aspect, which is why they did it. But I think a roller coaster dark ride would be better suited at a place like Cedar Point, especially if you put like I've been advocating for disaster transport overlay on a dark ride at Cedar Point for years now. It's been at least 5 years since I've
Well,
said
and
that.
Canada's Wonderland already has a Boo Blasters back in the Snoopy area. So
Yeah,
in a way, they already have their dark ride.
yeah.
I know that Guardian is sort of the more signature dark ride,
But
but
is
a
it
lot of these
because like I don't know, like it's about the same length. It's about
Cedar Point doesn't have anything like that.
yeah.
So that's why I think even though you could argue it's a signature attraction at Canada's Wonderland, I feel like it's one that you can take out and you don't lose a whole heck of a lot, and you still have the ability there to do something cool and to do something fun, and you get Rougarou as sort of another signature B&M. So now you've got 4, and you've got one that's completely different, really, than the rest of them, where it's really just focused on the inversions and the layout and everything. And I think you could even do it, maybe not so much now that you've got Yukon Striker, but you could have, before Yukon Striker, you could have put that where Skyrider was and have it go over the lake and do the same thing with the fog and mist. It doesn't matter where you put it. We're not talking about that.
Yeah.
But, there's certainly opportunity to do something cool like that still with the fog and the water.
Well, and when you said this to me, I came to the idea too. I said, well, you know what? I said, if Cedar Point, because I kind of went down this road too. If Cedar Point needs a dark ride, and I said, well, maybe the trade is not so much Wonder Mountain's Guardian, because to me, that's kind of like, I don't know. I don't think it's good enough for Cedar Point, to be honest. It's fun. It's whatever. It's forgettable in my mind. But I said, you know what? What is a signature dark ride that may also be a roller coaster that would fit the bill of Cedar Point needing? That we were talking about Olympia looping for a long time.
Yeah.
Talking about Olympia looping going to Cedar Point, and I'm still pissed off that it's not. But a signature classic roller coaster, something that Cedar Point's got Blue Streak, Cedar Point's got Gemini, but that's still kind of modern. A signature classic coaster that's also a dark ride. What about Space Mountain coming to Cedar Point?
No, I think that's an excellent
And
idea.
obviously, this is fantastical. This isn't reality here. Disneyland in California is never going to get rid of Space Mountain, but Disneyland in California, I think they need, like, we see Orlando kind of beefing up their roller coaster collection with Guardians and with Tron. I think Disneyland needs to beef up a roller coaster collection, and maybe Rougarou fits out there. I don't know. Maybe is it Rougarou? Is it Gemini you trade again?
Yeah.
Gemini would be an interesting trade because you're bringing that whole Arrow banner together again.
Yeah, that's the one that immediately sticks out to me there. Or is it? Well, it's probably not something like Mine Ride, but they've already got that.
No, because Space Mountain's a good ride. Space Mountain in Disneyland's a solid ride, so you need a solid ride in return, I think. But that was another side tangent I had in my mind of maybe
give them Maverick and put Maverick in Frontierland.
Shit. I tell you what. A Maverick.
Rob Dole just like shat his pants.
I know. But a Maverick for Space Mountain trade is an even up trade. That's an even up trade. There is no question that Disneyland gets a signature real roller coaster, maybe a little too intense for Disneyland crowds.
Yeah, probably.
And Cedar Point gets that signature classic coaster with and I'm talking about the whole deal. The structure, the mountain itself, the indoor part. I'm talking about the whole kit and caboodle.
You get everything.
Get everything, especially in a trade for Maverick. You get everything there, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That's really interesting, though. Interesting. I like it. So,
yeah.
I kind of like how we did this tonight. I thought we had some good suggestions, right?
And we've already talked about some more, and I've got one or two others that I've come up with. So I think this might have to be something that we revisit again.
Yeah, absolutely. So we will definitely revisit the coaster swap concept here coming up.
And let us know what some of the ones you would do are,
Yeah.
because maybe we'll talk about some of those.
Or vote which ones you like as your favorite too. Like which trade do you think made the most sense here amongst
Yeah,
all of them
yeah.
and help both parks. So as always, I am Andy Robarchek from Chicago, Illinois.
I'm Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
Right on, Ride Warriors.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.